Okay, so we are reading I Am Malala. Looks backwards in the video. Chapter 18, and it's titled A Humble Request in a Strange Place. Swat was finally at peace. The army remained, but the shops reopened. Women walked freely in the markets, and I beat Malka-e-Noir for first place. I felt so hopeful about the future of my valley that I planted a mango seed outside our house. I knew it would take a long time for the seed to bear fruit, like the reconciliation and rebuilding the government had promised, but it was my way of saying I was full of hope for a long and peaceful future in Mingora. One of my biggest worries in those days was that around the time I turned 13, I stopped growing. Whereas before I was one of the tallest girls in my class, now I was among the smallest. So I had a humble request. Every night I prayed to Allah to make me taller. Then I measured myself on my bedroom wall with a ruler and pencil. And every morning I would stand against it to check if I had grown. I even promised that if I could grow just a tiny bit taller, even an inch, I would offer 100 rakat naful, extra prayers on top of my daily ones. I was speaking at so many events, but I felt that my height got in the way of being authoritative. I was so short that sometimes it was hard to get people's attention. In early 2010, our school was invited to take part in the District Child Assembly SWAT, which had been set up by the charity UNICEF and by the Kapal Kaur, my home foundation for orphans. 60 students from all over SWAT had been chosen as members. They were mostly boys, but 11 girls from my school participated. And when we held an election for speaker, I won. It was strange to stand on a stage and have people address me as Madam Speaker, but I took the responsibility very seriously. The assembly met almost every month for a year, and we passed 9 resolutions. We called for an end to child labor. We asked for help to send disabled and street children to school. We demanded that all the schools that had been destroyed by the Taliban be rebuilt. Once the resolutions were agreed upon, they were sent to officials, and some were even acted on. We were being heard. We were making a difference, and it felt good. By fall, clouds had gathered. A friend of my father's, a man who had spoken out against the Taliban, was ambushed on his way home. Then another man, a politician who had been critical of the Taliban, was killed by a suicide bomber. The summer of 2010 brought torrential rains, a monsoon that flooded the valley, sweeping away everything in its wake. Oh, another natural disaster. What do you think is going to happen now that there's another natural disaster? Throughout Pakistan, more than 2,000 people drowned. Millions lost their homes, and 7,000 schools were destroyed. Our home was on a bit of a rise, so we were safe from the flooding, but our school on the banks of the river was hit hard. When the waters receded, there were chest-high watermarks. Our desks and chairs were covered with thick, foul-smelling mud. Repairs would be very costly. The damage in Shangla was even worse. And fundamentalist religious leaders suggested once again that God had sent a natural disaster as punishment for enjoying un-Islamic behaviors. By early 2011, the Taliban had blown up 2 more schools. They kidnapped 3 foreign aid workers and murdered them. And another friend of my father's, a university president who'd been outspoken against the Taliban, was killed by 2 gunmen who burst into his office. In May of that year, Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks, was killed in his hiding place in Abbottabad, just a stone's throw away from our military academy. Then an anonymous letter addressed to my father came to our house. "You are the son of a religious cleric," it said, "but you are like a convert. You are not a good Muslim. You have spoken against us, and you will face the consequences. The Mujahideen will find you wherever you go on the surface of the earth." It was starting to seem as if the Taliban had never really left. I tried to tell myself this terrible letter was just the futile and parting shot of a defeated Taliban. But still, I prayed for my father's safety every day. I prayed for my school to remain open and for the bombed out schools to be rebuilt. I also continued to ask God to make me taller. If I was going to become a politician and work for my country, I told God, I would have to at least be able to see over the podium.